Dear professors, colleagues, young scholars, speakers, guests, good morning. On behalf of the American Culture and Literature and English Language and Literature departments, we're greatly honored and pleased to welcome you all to the Undergraduate Conference on Anglo-American Literature, representing the other. As you all know, the purpose of this conference is to explore the concept of otherness as it is reflected in literature, media, and gender studies. Speakers from different universities, cities, countries gather to discuss the representation of the other and will shed light on how we understand the other. In contemporary world, the other is viewed not only as an enemy to be fought out, but also as one to be eliminated and/or subordinated. Othering often involves the demonization and dehumanization of groups, which further justifies attempts to civilize and exploit the inferior others. How do writers, artists, musicians, filmmakers fight against or ultimately reinforce such deadly representations? We're going to find out together. For 2 days, we shall be listening to papers composed with great enthusiasm and vigor, similar to how we felt while organizing this conference. I'd like to thank all English Language and Literature and American Culture and Literature students who heartily and devotedly worked to make this conference an event with their ideas, suggestions, determination, and support. It is not possible to tell their names here, but special thanks go to Saliha Arseven, who has done all the email contacts, received and sent the incoming and outgoing requests, infos, and shared them with the rest of the committee day and night. Sinem Orallı, who did all the paperwork, corrections, amendments, prepared the name tags, and provided us with unending support in many ways. Melih Mom, who designed the poster of the conference, and more than an unforgettable sign for those who view it. Betül Erdem, who prepared the brochures you hold now. Ahmet Can Vargün, who designed the conference webpage and helped us announce it to the world. Eda Barlas, English Language and Literature Department Secretary, without whom we could not finalize the preparations. Aykut Akgöz, Nesrin Mutlu, Yonca Bakır deserves special thanks as well. With the presence of all young, bright scholars, I'm sure this conference will be a memorable, highly educational, and not to be missed event. I hope this conference will inspire and equip you with new ideas, help you better understand the concept of otherness. We truly value your participation and support for this conference. Thank you so much for coming and for your attention. Now, I'd like to invite Dean Professor Hanman to the stage to greet you and to deliver his opening speech if he kindly accepts this offer. Thank you.
Greetings, good morning. You're all welcome to Bilkent. This is a very interesting and exciting event, and I'm very happy that our faculty has been supporting this endeavor. But it's essentially the creative work of Gül Kurtuluş, who is essentially the guiding spirit, the intellect of the Department of English Language and Literature, and Dr. Ted Cohn, who is exactly the same thing for the Department of American Culture and Literature at this university. I'd also like to greet Dr. Ayşe Çelikkoğlu, who is a member of both departments. That is quite something, isn't it? And of course, there are other faculty members here from both departments, and they've all done their yeoman's work to create this event. American and English literature Well, as you probably know, most of you know, I'm sure, George Bernard Shaw once said that England and America are two countries divided by the same language. For us Turks, as well as for most people outside of the English-speaking world, English is one single creative language, one single academic and creative language. We feel the same way as well, but because of the substance and the style can be quite different across the Atlantic, it's possible to consider these two literatures as being quite separate. Here at Bilkent, we certainly do it that way, but my feeling is that in Turkey, although we've had a very long experience with the teaching of English literature first, followed by the teaching of American literature a few years later, the creativity has not been impressive. And I say that with deep regret, but disappointment, almost with anger. The University of Istanbul started its Department of English Philology. It's actually a faculty, it still is, of English Philology in the late 1930s. And the University of Ankara started English literature in the 1940s, and by the beginning of the 1950s, there was a full-fledged Department of American Literature at the University of Ankara. And this is a period of almost 7 decades, 70 years. And in that period, the teaching has been splendid in many instances. The professors imparted knowledge that they acquired from their own reading and their own studies in Turkey or outside of Turkey, because many of them actually went to universities in England or in America, and a few in Canada. And they were very fluent, they were eloquent in their use of English, and many of them were excellent teachers, lecturers, but for some reason they concentrated on the teaching, on imparting knowledge, rather than questioning, rather than dealing with the creative and critical aspects of language. My wife was a student at Istanbul University in English philology in the late 1940s and early 1950s, when the great Professor Halide Edip Adıvar, who is, as most of you know, I'm sure, a great Turkish novelist, intellectual, going back to the Ottoman times. She was a great hero, intellectual hero in the closing years of the Ottoman Empire, and a very important personality in the very early period of the Turkish Republic. She left the country because of political disagreements, but came back in 1938 and shortly thereafter joined the Department of English Philology as a full professor, as a resident goddess. And my wife, at the first lecture, I think, Professor Halide Edip Adıvar gave her lecture. At the end, my wife raised her hand and said, "Professor, could I ask you a question? Could you clarify something?" And Halide Edip Adıvar, the great Turkish intellectual who had been raised in the tradition of American and British intellectual freedom, said, "Who are you to ask me a question? Take your hand up." And from that point on, nobody ever dared ask Halide Edip Adıvar a question. So that was unfortunately the spirit of teaching at our universities at that time. It was far better in Ankara when the Ankara University was established and started its program in English literature, because it was headed by a very important professor by the name of Professor Orhan Buryan, who had studied at Cambridge and had also been at Princeton for 1 year as a guest scholar, and he was open-minded, and he liked the idea of discussing with students. He invited questions, and he was a very gracious man, a wonderful person who even accepted critical views from the students. My wife went to America on a Fulbright scholarship after graduating from the University of Istanbul, and she went to Northwestern University, and at the first lecture she attended, given by a venerable old professor there, one of the students at the end of that lecture said, "Professor, I must say you haven't prepared well for this lecture. We're very disappointed, at least I have a feeling my fellow students here share the same impression, that you're not prepared for this lecture." And my wife froze, of course, remembering what Hal David had told her, but the American professor at Northwestern said, "Yes," he said, "you're absolutely right. I want to apologize to you and to the whole class. I'm not well prepared for this lecture. I've not been feeling well, and I was going to prepare my lecture yesterday and last night, but many things came up and it proved impossible for me to come better prepared. But I can assure you," he said, "I'll be prepared for every future lecture, and I think you will probably be satisfied with my performance." So that is the great difference in mentality. Most of our professors at that time were dictators who simply dictated, and the students had to sit down and write. But we don't want to do that. There's been a great transformation in the teaching of British and American literature. There is discussion now, there's question and answer, there are critical views expressed, and our faculty is open to questions and criticism, and we want to maintain that. That is why I'm more optimistic about what our departments of English and American literature will produce from now on. But I must say, when I express that optimism, that expectation, that the great disappointment I feel, of course, I'm nobody to speak along those lines, because I represent the other. I'm in Turkish literature, not English literature or American literature, although I've occasionally tried my hand at translating Shakespeare and Milton and American poets and Faulkner, etc. I failed in doing those things, but I only translated, and that is something I want to caution against. Most of the teachers in our universities in these two departments are translators, in addition to being dictators. They don't do enough creative work. They're not critically involved. Unfortunately, they simply take knowledge over from America or from England, and they simply impart it to students. And that is where it ends. I'm thinking of creativity in scholarship. In 70 years, I can think of very few scholars in our departments of English and American literature who have produced major scholarly articles, and I cannot think of any important scholarly book that has been published by either Istanbul people or Ankara people who happen to be specializing in these two fields. And why is it that Poland can create a great scholar in English literature on Shakespeare? Why is it that India can produce wonderful scholars who are active and still publishing marvelous books and scholarly articles as well? Why are they doing it, and why can't we do it? And we've had even some guest professors from Turkey going to England or America as guest lecturers or as faculty members at some major universities even, and they too have not produced any creative work. My plea to you, my request to you is that you should not just take over knowledge and spread it to your students if you continue in the academic world. If you do, please try to be creative, try to publish important, interesting articles in major scholarly journals in the English-speaking world. That is the only way you can prove yourself as important scholars. If not, it's going to be a continuing disappointment. We'll probably, if you don't do that, we'll complete 100 years of Anglo-American literature in this country without any creativity. That is extremely sad. That is why conferences such as this, giving an opportunity to you young scholars, young creative minds, are possibly great avenues of creativity. And I invite you to that. Preparing such a conference, of course, has been a very difficult task, and our students and some of our faculty members have been very illustrious in this respect. I'd like to mention some of the names of our students who organized this event, principally Melih Mo, Saliha Arseven, Sinem Orallı, Ahmet Can Vargül, Betül Erdem, Eda Varlas, and there are also students from some major universities, University of Ankara, Sorbonne Nouvelle, Ege University, Hacettepe, Istanbul Kültür University, and Middle East Technical University. Those are among the best departments of English and American literature in this country. And I'm hoping that looking at the marvelous titles of the presentations that will be made by the students who have come from those countries from those universities to Bilkent to participate in this event. They've come up with wonderful titles, and I'm looking forward to listening to some of the lectures with great interest, and I'd like to applaud those of you who are committed to giving their best. I'm sure this will be a memorable event, and if it succeeds in the way that we are hoping, we'll probably make this an annual event with greater participation. But this participation is truly impressive. I'm very happy to see all of you here. We are going to be serving coffee as well. As you know, coffee is the wine of Islam, as Europeans used to refer to it. And an Ottoman ambassador in Paris had said, those who dye coffee in their bellies go straight to paradise. So I'm hoping that with the marvelous coffee that was provided with compliments of that great old Ottoman Turkish institution, Kuru Kahveci Mehmet Efendi ve Mahtumları, I hope that you will not die, but you will go to paradise anyway. And if you enjoy yourselves, if you like the presentations here, I'm sure the English-speaking world will take notice of you. And I do hope that some of your papers will be developed into publishable articles. If that doesn't happen, this is still a wonderful beginning to write, to research, to question, to provide answers, to criticize, and to make a name for yourselves in the English-speaking world. Unless you do that, it's really a mechanical thing, and you'll be like your predecessors in this field, simply giving lectures, giving examinations, and not training great creative minds. So I'm greeting all of you, since Kurtuluş asked me to greet. I'm greeting all of you, not merely as students, not merely as people who are getting degrees. That is a very easy thing, essentially, especially for those of you who have had the pleasure and privilege of studying English. It's not very difficult to study English and American literature, in addition to it's being very pleasurable, very enjoyable. But what matters is becoming great scholars. Please, 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 I'll be grateful to you if you take notice of the fact that in this field, as in many other fields, academic life is worthwhile only on the basis of scholarship, creativity, critical thinking. Thank you very much. Enjoy the proceedings. All my best wishes to all of you.